Welcome to today's Marketplace. I'm Jane King at the New York Stock Exchange, and today we are joined by Dr. Scott Shipman, the Executive Director of the Creighton University Institute for Population Health, and Dr. Maria Maccecchini, the founder, president, and CEO of Annovis Bio. Great to have you both here. Dr. Shipman, when most people think about the term healthcare, they envision a patient visiting a doctor's office or a hospital or something, but what is population health?
Sure. Well, as a physician myself, I certainly understand the typical focus of caring for an individual patient and recognize the importance of high quality care for individual patients. Population health, though, I think is a complement to patient care in that it widens the lens and has us focusing on communities and within those communities variations in health to understand the drivers of disparities in health at the population level.
Now, when you're talking about the health of 345 million people, that seems kind of like a monumental challenge. How do you tackle that?
Well, it is a monumental challenge, but you have to remember that our national population breaks down into many smaller populations. And so the population that is served by a particular health system or a particular provider or clinic is a population of focus within the population health realm, just as a community might be on a geographic level.
Now, Dr. Maccecchini, your company, Annovis Bio, is focused on large populations affected by neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And there have been drugs on the market for about 25 years, but they really just slow the decline. They don't stop it. And I've lived through this, as many families have. But you have some possible promising results. Can you explain those?
Yes, we do. And actually, my mom died of Alzheimer's disease. So this is very close to my heart. But I really do it for the patients because we have over 7 million people with neurodegeneration in the United States. And it is a huge problem. And we think of the patients, but we really also should think of the caregivers, because the caregivers are very much affected by it. I mean, it really robs them of their life and in a lot of ways of their health. So yes, we have a drug that is a pill a day, which makes it very easy to take. It's very safe, which also is good because you have a population that is very weak and you do not want to weaken them any further. So our drug turns out to work in Alzheimer's and in Parkinson's, and at least in a short 3 and 6 month study in either disease, it shows that it does not just slow the decay, but it actually improves. In Alzheimer's, it improves cognition in early Alzheimer patients, and in Parkinson's, it improves function and cognition in Parkinson's patients.
Which of the proteins is this particular drug or your company targeting?
So most people have heard of plaque. That's for Alzheimer's, and maybe Lewy bodies for Parkinson's. It turns out that our drug attacks plaque, tangles, Lewy bodies. It attacks the toxic proteins that kill nerve cells in the brain, and it attacks more than one. So if you have more than one protein, just removing one, you still have the other proteins that kill the nerve cells. Our drug actually protects nerve cells from dying.
How many people could benefit from this medication?
Well, theoretically, most of the 7 million. We don't know and probably don't think it works in very advanced disease, but it works in early to mid disease. So a good 3 to 4 million, yes.
And you've completed 10 studies on humans, but you're seeking funding for an 18-month study.
Yes.
So what do you hope to accomplish with that?
So basically, 10 studies sounds like a lot, but I have to explain that the very first ones were done in healthy volunteers, and they really just look at safety. And then we did small studies in small populations of patients. So the last study we did in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, which I just told you about, that we saw really good data, was in 350 Alzheimer patients and in 450 Parkinson's patients. Now, the FDA always wants you to do 2 studies for every disease before they approve the drug. So we need to do one more large study. That would be an 18-month, 600-patient study in Alzheimer's and an 18-month, 600 patients in Parkinson's to be on the market. We think that with a little bit of luck, we'll be in the market in a few years.
And in addition to the promising results, the side effects are also minimal.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Well, that's one of the lucky parts. When you develop a drug, you don't really know what the side effects are because you test them in mice and rats and dogs, and then you go into a very limited amount of healthy people. And then you go into patients, but the larger the patient population, the more likely you are to find side effects because the patient population becomes more diverse. And they may have different characteristics, different genes, different comorbidities, which is different diseases. And so you really don't know. So we were really lucky because it turns out that our drug does not affect the liver, it does not affect the kidneys, it does not affect the heart, it does really not affect anything other than the brain. And at this point, we really have a 5-time window between the dose we use and where we see side effects.
And Dr. Shipman, these neurodegenerative diseases not just affect the individual, but their families. And is that kind of what you're aiming for when you're studying population health?
In part, yes. We need to think about not just the patient, but the families and caregivers that also serve that patient and the healthcare workforce that is required to care for patients with neurodegenerative diseases and other diseases. If we can keep patients healthier longer, we can reduce the burden on the healthcare workforce and allow that limited resource to stretch further. There's one other thing that's worth calling out here with an innovation like this drug, and that is that there is a significant gap for most innovations between when the evidence is solid that they are a best practice and when we actually get those innovations widely practiced in the field. That gap is almost 17 years, which is far too long for getting the best practice out to everyone who could benefit from it. So implementation science is something at the Institute for Population Health that we are really focused on to help reduce that gap in time so that patients can benefit broadly and equitably in the benefits that new drugs and other therapies can provide.
And you were mentioning exercise can shorten that.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
Yes. One of the interesting things is there are not many drugs, and the drugs we have at this point are not very good. But what we know for sure is that exercise and diet, good blood circulation, good sugar metabolism, not too much, not too little, that can really lower the risk of Alzheimer's disease and stave off the onset for about 10 years. And while that is really well documented, most people either don't know it or don't do it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.